Glenn Schumann, co-defensive coordinator for the University of Georgia Bulldogs. This is an interesting conversation, guys. This is a very different type of candidate here. Glenn Schumann is different from the other guys that we've talked about, although he's young and there are some of the telltale markers here. But he conceptualizes defense differently. Most of the guys that we talked about have been secondary guys, so they see it from the back end to the front end. Glenn Schumann is an inside linebacker coach inside of that 34 UGA system. So he's going to see things a little bit more from the front seven to the back seven, which is a completely different approach. Let's get into it, guys. We're going to talk system, scheme, conceptual ideas, the whole 9 yards, and candidacy. All right, y'all. Let's start. What's up, Cerebral football fans? My name is Steven Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel. This is a very interesting conversation when we get into breaking down the different styles of odd front defenses. And the first thing I will warn right from the jump is Glenn Schumann and Kirby Smart. Really, and honestly, this all starts with Nick Saban, to be honest. But, Dan Lanning and all these guys that we're going to talk about today, yeah, they're known as 34 fronts, as odd fronts. But truth be told, guys, they run a lot of even fronts too. So they are multiple in the fronts. That's the first thing I'm going to tell you right from the jump, okay? Now, saying that, there are different styles of 34 fronts or odd front defenses, right? There's the old school Bill Belichick and Dean P style, where they had Matt Patricia's the linebacker coach. We're talking early 2000s, before the 2010 decade, basically. So what we're basically talking about there is when you have an Okie front, or what they call the Fairbanks-Bullis system, which to, shorten that up, guys, just means you got a 0 tech who's 2 gapping and 2 5 techs that are 2 gapping on the defensive line. You got 3 down linemen, 2 gapping. And then you got 2 off-ball, stacked inside the tackle box linebackers. One is called a Ted linebacker. One is labeled a Mike linebacker. The Ted linebacker gets no glory. Most of us don't know who those guys are. But the Mike linebacker, he got all the glory. The Ted linebacker had to be the guy that took on the lead blocks. He had to blow the play up. But then the Mike linebacker got all the stat-worthy, cushioned stat stuff, if you will, right? That's your Patrick Willis's. So if you go back, you look at that 49ers, Mike Nolan, early 2000s, later 2000 decade teams, right? If you look at Mike Nolan there, and then you had Greg Minuski as the defensive coordinator. Mike Singletary was the linebacker coach. Jim Tom Solo was your defensive line coach. You had Vance Joseph as the secondary coach on that 49ers team, right? Those guys, right? You might not know Ulbrich, but Ulbrich was normally the Ted on that team. Just like if you went to the New England Patriots and I brought up Adalius Thomas, a lot of people might be like, who? But you guys definitely know Teddy Bruschi, and you guys definitely knew Patrick Willis. It's that style of system, right? Then you get the Eagle fronts, things you saw from Brandon Staley with the Rams back in like 2020, right? That's a one-gap odd front, okay? They're playing a one-gap system where they had a nose tackle and 2 4-eyes, all right? Then you had the Wade Phillips system. Think the Texans, Wade Phillips, okay? That was what they called the underfront, to where generally speaking, most of those dudes played a one-gap. But what you ended up having is towards the weak side, playing on the weak side, you had a 3 technique there who 2-gapped, okay? And then on the strong side, you had your nose tackle who's normally shaded, and then you had a 5 technique and a Sam linebacker outside that 5 technique, all to the strong side. That's the Wade Phillips thing. I would argue what we saw from Jonathan Gannon was a little closer to Wade Phillips and Brandon Staley's Eagle than anything else that we saw. Also, I will warn you, the Steelers ran a lot of Eagle, too, in the 2010s. So, how is it different? How is our conversation today going to be different? Because this is a different adaptation to a 30 front than what we're used to, okay? We are talking about a way of defending at the college level spread offenses, which are now making their way up to the NFL, which is why I think some of these guys are getting so much interest. And when you look at that Nick Saban, Kirby Smart, Dan Lanning, Glenn Schumann, who we're interviewing, coaching tree, their system, the way I normally hear it described, is a spread 34 with the creeper. Now, we have to talk a lot about the alignments here and kind of how these guys play, okay? First thing I'm going to tell you is throw out everything that you know about a 34 front and the Okie front, where you had, you got 2 off-ball linebackers that are stacked. And you got a Ted linebacker and you got a Mike linebacker. They don't really use that terminology, guys. You got a weak side linebacker, you got a Mike linebacker, okay? Normally when they play a 52 front, by the way. They do it that way. But I would tell you that this one, focus on the creeper, and then focus on the way that they use what they call the jack linebacker, because that's where the magic's going to be here, guys, okay? Yes, they play a nose tackle. Think Jordan Davis in that system. And yes, their strong side defensive tackle. So think Fletcher Cox in our system was a guy who really was disruptive for the run game. Okay, he's a guy that gets single blocks and would normally eat up the run game. Think Jalen Carter this year, all right? So when you look at this defense, the first thing you have to think about is how are some of these guys going to fit the scheme? Because right away you have to know what they call the money backer, who's the creeper. Money backer is also called a star role in other, defenses, and that is a hybrid safety linebacker type, or it can be your nickel corner. That's a guy who's going to creep, move up on the line of scrimmage guys and fill in for run gaps, things like that. Of course, we have guys that can play that role from the safety spot. We have guys at the nickel spot that can play, but I would also say that this is where the first argument can take place if a guy like this is hired, and I'm not saying he's going to get hired, guys. I don't know. With that said, if this type of system were brought to the Philadelphia Eagles, you can see why you might want to make a case to maybe let T.J. Edwards walk, even though I'm a huge T.J. Edwards fan. I'd like to see him back here in Philadelphia. But you could see why Nakobe Dean might make more sense as a Mike linebacker in a system like this, where he's already played the Mike linebacker in this system. And then maybe bring back Kaiser White to play that Joker role, or to actually play, to play the Jack linebacker role, or to play the weak side on or off ball, what I'm saying, kind of stacked linebacker role, if you will. So, right from the jump, man, I'm going to tell you is they move their fronts a lot. They like to shift and move their fronts quite a bit. There's quite a few times, if you go back and you watch the film from even the year prior with Dan Lanning and Kirby Smart in the national championship game, you can see that they like to move their fronts to try to confuse the blocking scheme. It's quite creative. I like that a lot, and I like the idea of what we could do here from a front. Because the one thing that I will say is we've got to figure things out from a four-man front. And I do think that this staff is creative with, number one, mixing in four-man fronts and making it difficult, but also making it look like a four-man front, but bringing down a guy and making it actually a five-man front. So, right from the jump, guys, I'm going to say that I like the conceptual ideas that they bring here, although we'd have to probably talk about fit and scheme, and we need a lot out of Jordan Davis, man. Jordan Davis has got to be better. But I could see if you can get Jordan Davis to play that role, he'd be your nose tackle when you're in the 50 front, of course. But, if you can keep him on the field as that strong side defensive tackle, and then you got Milton Williams to play the weak side defensive tackle, you got something, I think. Yeah, Javon Hargrave coming back would be a welcome addition. Of course, he's a great pass rusher, but I think you got something in terms of like trying to free yourself up from some money, but still keeping quality guys inside the trenches. And then you have the ability to take really, really good defensive ends who can play the run. Josh Sweat is a really good run defender, guys. He can get a pass rush, but he can play the run pretty well. I think you got something here in Philadelphia, guys, being able to move and manipulate boxes like this. This is a very interesting, guy to take a look at, man. This is a very interesting, coach and decision to make here. This is a very interesting outside-the-box kind of move here. Very good against the run, if I'm being honest, in certain circumstances. If you look at average line yards, he ranked number 5 in the NCAA football, 2.21 yards. Power success rate, he ranked 10th, 52.6%. Power success rate meaning, guys, is those very short yard situations. They won more than 50% of the time. Stuff rate, 37th. He was tied for 37th in stuff rate at 19.9%. He got results out of that sometimes light box. It's interesting how they play things. They play a lot of man coverage. And I don't know if he's responsible for that because he's not a secondary guy, but I will say that his system this season featured a lot of man coverage, between 30 to 35%, depending on the corner you're looking at. So, Kamari Lassiter is the right cornerback there, what we would call the boundary side normally, at least in the game that I studied. 32.2% of his snaps came out of man coverage. Javon Bullard played their slot or nickel, 34.3% out of man coverage. Keely Ringo, 31.5% man coverage. He normally played, from the game I watched, he normally played the left cornerback, or what I would honestly kind of consider more the field side. This is an interesting coaching decision to make here. I don't know. I don't know how interested they are on him, but I will say that he's got experience working with a few of our guys inside the defense, right? He's worked as the inside linebacker coach, so you know that he's very familiar with Nakobe Dean. He's worked off of Jordan Davis's ability to disrupt blocking schemes. I love what they do with their linebackers from a four-man front. The way they use their linebackers to come in and shoot the gaps and blitz and stuff. I honestly like what he does a lot. I like the things he does from a conceptual standpoint. He's young. He's very young at 32 years old, guys. It is what it is. I don't know how successful he will be in the NFL if he ever makes that jump, and I'm not too sure if he wants to make the jump to the NFL. I mean, he might want to be a college head coach. I don't know. That's why you bring these dudes in and you talk to them, right, to find out where they are. Are you a pro guy or are you a college guy? What do you ultimately want to be? Interesting guy. I think this is a young man that if I was in his position, I had an opportunity to coach at the NFL level, I would take it. Because you're going to have plenty of opportunities to go back to college. I mean, to be quite fair, the track record, the coaching tree you come out of, somebody's going to want you at the college level if it doesn't work out in the NFL. I would probably take a swing and a shot on the NFL if I had the opportunity and I was this young man personally. All right, y'all. I appreciate y'all's time and attention. Let me know what you think down below. What do you think about the scheme? What do you think about some of the fits here in Philadelphia? How would you try to play some of these guys? You got to look at that money backer star role, right? You have the Jack linebacker role. Jack linebacker is kind of like Hassan Reddick, but where Hassan Reddick plays the strong side, the Jack linebacker is actually a weak side guy. You have the differences in the way that they play their off-ball stacked linebackers. It's a little different from us. This is interesting, man. This is definitely an interesting conversation. All right, guys, I appreciate y'all's time and attention. I'll see y'all in the next video.